My son Noah's 10th birthday was supposed to be the night he felt like a very important person at the city's most exclusive seafood lounge. Instead, it turned into the night my sister-in-law looked me straight in the eye across the reserved table and treated me like hired help. The private room overflowed with imported crystal, vintage champagne, and the empty smiles of her 6 uninvited influencer friends. Noah walked in holding his small cake, beaming. She ignored him completely. She shoved a 10-year-old boy right out of the center birthday chair, locked eyes with me, and snapped. "Marion, get that cheap cake out of my background. Tell the waiter to bring more chairs. And put your card down for this table. Consider it your rent for being in this family." I swallowed the hard lump in my throat. I squeezed my fists under the mahogany wood until my knuckles turned white. I calmly took my son's hand, wished her a lovely meal, and walked out the heavy oak doors to initiate her absolute financial ruin. I coordinate elite corporate events for a living. When a chief executive officer's private helicopter gets grounded an hour before a massive product launch, I fix it. I manage high-stakes crises for the top 1% every single day. I negotiate. I execute. I never break a sweat. But the most relentless crisis I have ever had to manage was not a demanding client. It was my 43-year-old sister-in-law, Heather. Heather is the family's untouchable golden child. She struts around, dripping in fresh off-the-runway designer clothing, acting like she owns the city. But peel back those labels, and she is absolutely drowning. Her entire manufactured life is funded by maxed-out credit cards, secret payday loans, and my husband's endless, exhausted guilt. Last year, she stole $2,000 straight out of our family vacation fund. She sobbed on the phone, swearing it was a life-or-death emergency to save her house from foreclosure. 2 days later, my feed was flooded with pictures of her sipping mimosas at a 5-star luxury spa. When I confronted my in-laws, they just shrugged. They told me to drop it. They told me family always bails out family. They dismissed my anger. They laughed at my boundaries then. But they had no idea that their laughter was sealing their absolute financial doom today. Heather did not crash Noah's birthday just to be cruel. She was suffocating under her own lies. She had made a reckless, desperate promise to those 6 fake influencers. She promised to host them at an ultra-exclusive seafood lounge, so they would tag her and invite her on a sponsored brand trip to Cabo San Lucas. Her bank accounts were frozen. Her husband's cards were declined everywhere in town. Hijacking my pristine, corporate reservation was her very last, frantic gamble to keep her fake rich persona breathing for one more night. She banked on my silence. She assumed I would just pull out my company card and swallow the bill like I always did to keep the peace. She assumed I was a doormat, but doormats do not bite back. Back in the main dining room, Heather was putting on the performance of a lifetime. The waiter had not even finished pouring the water before she started barking her order. "We will take 2 of the Grand Plateaus," she announced, waving her hand dismissively. "The ones with the Maine lobster and the caviar. And bring 3 bottles of your best vintage champagne. Keep them coming." She leaned across the table, making sure her fake influencer friends were recording her on their phones. "Do not hold back, girls. My sister-in-law is picking up the tab. She just plans little parties for a living. But she loves to treat us." The girls giggled, holding up their empty glasses for the camera. My mother-in-law, Elizabeth, sat frozen at the end of the table. She stared at the menu prices, the color draining completely from her face. Suddenly, she grabbed my elbow. Her fingernails dug into my skin. She pulled me up and dragged me into the shadowed hallway near the restrooms, away from the noise. Elizabeth's eyes brimmed with frantic, terrified tears. "Marion, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know Heather is completely out of line. I know she is, but she is struggling right now. Just be the bigger person. Put it on your card and let it go. We cannot make a scene in front of these people. Please, just do it to protect the family." I stared at her. For 10 years, this woman had demanded my silence to protect her daughter's fragile ego. I looked at her shaking hands, and something inside me just clicked off. The generational guilt evaporated. "You always use the word family when you want me to swallow poison," I said. My voice was dead calm, echoing off the tile walls. "You want me to buy her a $3,500 dinner while my 10-year-old son gets shoved out of his own birthday seat?" Elizabeth opened her mouth to argue, her tears spilling over. I stepped closer, forcing her to look me in the eye. Tonight, I would rather be a petty monster protecting my son than a bigger person feeding a parasite. I pulled my arm out of her grip, turned my back, and walked straight toward the hostess stand. I locked eyes with the general manager, Marcus. In my line of work, Marcus and I are on a first-name basis. I route tens of thousands of dollars in corporate dinners through his restaurant every quarter. He knows my face, and he knows the power of my corporate account. I pulled him into the quiet alcove near the kitchen. No arguments. No messy family explanations. Just pure, cold logistics. "Marcus, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. The reservation for the private room is moving downstairs to the chef's private wine cellar. Just my husband, my son, and our actual invited guests. Marcus nodded, his eyes darting briefly toward the chaos Heather was causing on the main floor. And the party currently seated upstairs? Table 4 is a walk-in, I said. Separate check. Add your mandatory 20% gratuity for large parties. Do not authorize a single cent to my account. If they try to put it on my tab, you decline it instantly. Marcus gave a sharp, professional nod. He understood exactly what was happening. I gathered Matthew, Noah, and our real friends from the lobby. I guided them down the spiral staircase, leaving the obnoxious noise of the main floor completely behind us. The chef's cellar was a sanctuary. It smelled like aged oak and roasted garlic. The staff brought down Noah's cake, lit the candles, and for the first time all night, my 10-year-old boy actually smiled. He finally looked like the king of the castle. I sat back in my leather chair and took a slow sip of my water. Downstairs, we had absolute peace. Upstairs, the clock was ticking on Heather's gluttonous performance. Every oyster she swallowed, every glass of vintage champagne she clinked, was just another nail in her own financial coffin. At exactly 9:15, the waiter placed a heavy black leather folder squarely in the center of table 4. $3,500. I stepped out of the private cellar staircase and stood quietly behind the hostess stand. I wanted to watch. Heather laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. She aggressively snatched the folder, pulled a gold credit card from her wallet, and tossed it onto the tray without even glancing at the itemized receipt. The waiter slid the card into the point-of-sale terminal. A sharp, high-pitched beep pierced the conversation. Declined. Heather's manicured fingers twitched. She let out a sharp breath, muttering something about a bank error, and dug frantically into her bag. She produced a second card. The waiter swiped it. Beep. Declined. Sweat broke out along Heather's hairline. Her expensive foundation suddenly looked chalky and uneven. Her husband, Kevin, sat frozen in his chair, staring at his empty plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Heather yanked a third card from the very back of her wallet, her hand visibly shaking as she shoved it toward the waiter. Beep. Declined. Lexi, the lead influencer with the million-follower smirk, watched the third red light flash on the machine. She scoffed. A brutal, entirely unbothered sound. Lexi reached into her designer clutch, pulled out a single, crumpled $20 bill, and tossed it onto the stained tablecloth. You are broke? Lexi sneered, her lip curling in absolute disgust. Pathetic. Lexi grabbed her coat and sprinted toward the exit. As she stormed past me, her thumb was already tapping furiously on her phone screen, blocking Heather on every social media platform before her ride even pulled up to the curb. The remaining 5 girls scattered like roaches dodging a flashlight. They muttered fake excuses about babysitters and early flights, practically tripping over each other to escape the blast zone. Within 60 seconds, Heather and Kevin were completely alone, holding a $3,500 bag. Heather whipped her head around and locked eyes with me standing by the hostess stand. The panic in her chest exploded into rage. Marion! She screamed, her voice cracking, completely shattering the upscale dining etiquette. Get over here right now and fix this. I walked up to the edge of her table. I looked down at the mountain of empty oyster shells and the drained bottles of vintage champagne. I looked at the terrifying reality sinking into her wide, desperate eyes. Uninvited guests pay their own way, I said. I turned my back and walked out the heavy glass doors, into the cool night air. Marcus did not let them follow me. He intercepted them before their shoes hit the lobby tile. Heather tried to scream. She tried to bluff. But Marcus simply placed a collateral agreement on the host stand. He gave her an ultimatum. Sign the paper, or leave in the back of a police cruiser for defrauding an innkeeper. Heather swallowed her pride. She surrendered her iPhone 14, her driver's identification, and Kevin's car keys directly into the restaurant's steel safe. Marcus gave her exactly 24 hours to return with $3,500 in cold, hard cash. The story should have ended at the restaurant. But desperation makes toxic people remarkably stupid. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Heather drove to my house clutching an old spare key. She was not just coming for Noah's birthday presents. Because of my event coordination business, she knew I kept a $5,000 emergency vendor envelope locked inside my home office desk. She was trying to rob my livelihood to save her own skin. But I know exactly who I am dealing with. I had a technician rip out the old cylinders and install a digital keypad deadbolt the night before. No physical keyhole. My phone vibrated violently on the kitchen counter. The camera feed flashed on the screen. Heather was frantically wedging a flathead screwdriver into the frame of my back patio door. The security system triggered. A 105 decibel siren ripped through the quiet suburban morning. Any normal burglar would sprint for their car. Heather froze. I tapped the microphone icon on my screen. Are you seriously trying to rob my business to pay for your oysters? I asked, my voice broadcasting cold and loud from the porch speaker. That single question shattered her remaining sanity. Her towering narcissism anchored her directly to the concrete. Instead of running, she stared straight into the camera lens and started screaming, completely ignoring the blaring alarm. She stood there, cursing my name, demanding I open the door, burning through the exact 7 minutes it took the patrol cars to block her in the driveway. I watched the officers force her face down onto the pavement, the metal handcuffs clicking around her wrists. The collateral damage was instantaneous. Kevin filed for divorce that exact same afternoon to desperately salvage his workplace security clearance. My in-laws, utterly terrified of paying a criminal bail bondsman, permanently blocked their golden child's phone number. The police cruisers drove away, taking Heather with them. But the absolute destruction of her life had just begun. Physical laws have a domino effect, and so does the legal system. Because Heather spent that entire morning sitting in a county holding cell for attempted residential burglary, she physically missed her 24-hour deadline to pay the restaurant. Marcus did exactly what he promised. He handed her collateral over to the police and officially filed a second felony charge for theft of services. 2 felonies in 2 days. The court eventually handed her a harsh plea deal. She received 3 years of strict probation, 500 hours of community service, and a court-ordered restitution of $3,500, paid directly to the restaurant. The social fallout was even more brutal. Lexi and the rest of the fake influencers actually found Heather's public mugshot and posted it on their social media pages to mock her. Kevin finalized the divorce in under 6 months to save his corporate security clearance. My in-laws had to empty their remaining retirement savings just to cover her defense attorney, and the sheer financial terror finally broke their toxic loyalty. They blocked their golden child's number for good. 6 months passed. The dust settled. Then, last Tuesday, a plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Heather, scribbled on cheap notebook paper. She wrote about how hard her life was now, living in a cramped studio apartment. She wrote that she forgave me for overreacting. She actually used the phrase, "At the end of the day, we are still family." I read the ink on the page. My pulse stayed perfectly steady. My hands rested calmly on the kitchen island. I folded the paper in half, dropped it directly into the trash can, and went back to making my morning coffee. Our house feels entirely different now. The air is light. We hosted a summer barbecue last weekend, filling the backyard with our actual friends, our neighbors, and colleagues who respect my time and my home. Nobody demanded expensive wine. Nobody screamed at my son. Noah ran around the grass with his friends, laughing until his sides hurt. We built a circle of people who treat us with basic human decency. We chose our family. And the peace is absolutely deafening. Toxic people build prisons out of their own fake images, and they demand you pay the rent. But you always hold the key to walk out. If you are exhausted from carrying the weight of someone else's entitlement, I need you to remember 3 rules. First, blood never makes you family. Basic, unwavering respect does. Never let biology be a free pass for emotional abuse. Second, boundaries without ironclad consequences are just suggestions. If you do not let them fall, they will never stop leaning their dead weight entirely on you. Third, true power is silent. You never have to scream. You never have to argue. You just have to separate the checks and let gravity do its job. That $3,500 I refuse to pay is currently sitting in a high-yield college savings account for Noah. Have you ever had to choose between cutting off toxic blood or letting them drain you completely dry? Tell me your story down in the comments. And if you have ever had to become the villain in their story just to protect your own peace, hit subscribe. I am Marion, and my tab is permanently closed. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, Marion, why on earth did you bail this woman out for years? Why did you let her steal $2,000 from your vacation fund without calling the cops the very first time? It is so easy to judge from the outside, is it not? But let us get real for a second. Marion was not stupid. She was trapped in what behavioral psychologists call the slot machine effect. It is formally known as intermittent reinforcement. When you are dealing with a toxic family member or an entitled golden child, they do not treat you like garbage 100% of the time. Every once in a while, they give you a crumb of hope. A fake apology, a decent holiday dinner, a fleeting moment where they act like a real, supportive family. You keep putting your money and your emotional energy into the machine, pulling the lever, hoping for the jackpot of genuine love. You are not weak. You are simply addicted to the illusion that they will eventually change. But when the illusion finally shatters, you have to pivot. And that is exactly what Marion did at that seafood lounge. Let us break down her masterclass in financial self-defense. First, She used the audit strategy. Scammers and entitled leeches absolutely thrive in the gray area. They love saying things like, "Just put it on one tab. We will figure it out later." Or, "Do not worry about the exact numbers." Marion destroyed that gray area by intercepting the manager and forcing a separate check. When you demand an itemized bill, or when you draw a hard, logistical line on exactly who pays for what, parasites panic. They cannot survive under a magnifying glass. Second, she executed, building the case. When Heather showed up at her house the next morning, Marion did not just yell through a screen door or open herself up to a physical altercation. She let her high-definition security camera do the heavy lifting. She stayed safely inside, used the two-way audio to keep Heather talking, and gathered undeniable, time-stamped video evidence while the police were already on their way. In the real world, your frustration will not get you a conviction, but hard, digital evidence will. Finally, she embraced the buyout. For years, Marion's in-laws begged her to just pay the bills to keep the peace. But Marion realized that walking away and letting Heather face her own $3,500 disaster was the ultimate investment in her own freedom. Sometimes, the absolute cheapest way to get a toxic person out of your life forever is to let them bankrupt themselves on their own tab. Here's the final verdict. Your bank account is not a rehabilitation center for someone else's bad choices. Protecting your peace is not petty. It is basic survival. If you are funding someone else's fake reality, it is time to close the bank. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to use the audit strategy on a toxic family member? Did you finally separate the checks in your own life? Drop your experiences in the comments below,